Today I turn 10,000 days of life. I think it's like a pretty special number, you know? I'm 27 years old. I was born 20th of March of 1997. And today is 10th of August of 2024. And yeah, I wanted to do something special for this day. And I decided that I'm going to talk about things that I think are important in life. Yeah, I've been wanting to make a YouTube channel for a very long time. I just never committed to it. And I'm not expecting this to be the start of that, but I think that I'm going to, just give it a shot. I'm just going to talk my mind and I don't know, we'll see what comes out. So I've been thinking pretty loosely about all of these. These are all like concepts that I've thought about a lot through my life, but it's not like I've been like preparing what to say in this video. So if it comes in a very chaotic way or maybe a little bit of disconnected, it's because of that. So well, anyway, what can I say about me? My name is Ignacio or Nacho, my nickname. I'm 27, like I said. I'm a male, of course. I'm a software engineer. I live in Chile, and I'm doing this in English just because I think that it can reach more people this way. Yeah, well, so first thing on the list is reality and truth. So, oh man, I actually think that this one is the most important. The other ones might be like equally important, but this one must be the most important. I'm not going to like argue or argument like to the bottom of like everything, I'm just gonna go with like, I guess sharing what I come to realize in all these 10,000 days of life. So, what is real? I think reality and truth are two different things that are correlated. Um, Everything that's real is truth, but not everything that's truth is real. So, for example, if we make a theory, with some flawed assumptions, and we logically construct through those assumptions and come to conclusions, that would be truth, but it wouldn't be real, right? So, for example, if I say, okay, if we suppose that, I don't know, like immigrants are like raising the crimes, then a way to lower the crimes would be to like stop, having immigrants in the country. That, of course, it's like a flawed assumption because no, immigrants do not raise crime. I mean, well, maybe statistically, but what I'm saying is that it's not like every immigrant is a bad person, right? I was an immigrant for some time, so yeah. That would be truth based on that assumption. However, that assumption is not real. Therefore, reality and truth are not the same. But once again, everything that's real is truth. And by the way, I'm going to put a lot of like controversial topics right now, just because, fuck it. I'm already 10,000 days old. I don't really care too much if someone misinterprets what I'm trying to say. So anyway, going back to the point, I think that it's really important that we as humans like think like deeply what is real, I know that there's some like philosophical movements that are like, oh, but like nothing's real, out of your perception. It's like, shut up, man. Like, come on. A rock is real, whether you believe it or not. And your perception does not reflect reality, like per se. For example, if you see something red, but it's actually not red, it's just that you were like, I don't know, like by contrast, like saw it wrongly. There is such a thing as a physical world that is like completely independent of our perspective as humans and as conscious beings. However, I do also think that there's such a thing as an internal reality, which is, for example, like how you feel, right? That is real, and that does depend on your perception. If someone talks to you in a way that you don't like and you perceive that to be something that's like, oh, he was mean to me, okay, it's not that he was mean to you, but that feeling that he was mean to you is real, you know? However, I think that there's like a current of thought in this day and age that tends to like think that perception of reality equals reality, which is just not true. And I don't want to argue about that. To me, it's pretty obvious, you know, like once again, the physical world exists um, regardless of what we think about it. And I think that there are better and worse ways to figure out what's real and what works and what doesn't. So, for example, science is a pretty strong one, right? Like, science is truth regardless of what you think, you know? Some people say, like, oh, but, you know, some people don't believe in science, you know? Yeah, but, like, you know, how do you know that science is like true, you know, and real? Well, because it gives you power. It's based on reality. Without science, we couldn't, like, do things like going to space, going to the moon, make a flamethrower, or make a screen light up. So, I guess what I want to say is that when you start thinking about stuff and create like these mental models around like how what things are and how they are, you always have to contrast that with reality. That comes actually, you know, if you have like a theory and you like try to like bash it and like try to prove it wrong and you just can't, that's probably like a pretty good theory. That's actually how science works all the time. Like people are trying to constantly break it and they just can't. um and what's, I guess, like the contrast, like how do you check that? Well, you check that against reality itself. That's like the beauty of science. Now this train of thought can be extended to like other fields of knowledge, but I think that it starts becoming like more complicated to actually do that check and balance. Because, for example, with social sciences, you know, I'm not saying that they are not like real, that they are not like strict, you know, but honestly, I feel like there's been a lot of nonsense lately. A lot of things that are like wishful thinking, you know. For example, race theory, you know, I do believe that all these mental models are like different lenses that we use to like grasp what reality is. But you know, just like you would do with like images, if you want to see something far away, you go and use a telescope. If you want to see something up close, you do use a microscope. If you would try to use a microscope to see far away, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be the correct lens to use. You might like see some stuff, but it would be like a really how to say it, like deformed view of how things really are. And the same thing, like if you want to see, for example, X-rays, you're not going to use like your own eyes because we cannot see X-rays. So I think that it's really important that one understands that all your mental models, they are valid depending on the place and the context that you use them. So for example, if you want to like understand how traffic jams work, you don't go and start studying how the motor of a car works, right? Same way, like if you want to treat cancer, I think it's wrong to like go to like inside this cell, you know, and like see like on a one cell basis. I think that when you start thinking about systems and things that get more complex, you do need to like adjust the way that you think about things, because there is such a thing as emergent properties. For example, one atom does not have temperature. However, multiple atoms do have temperature, right? Or one bird cannot make a flying pattern. When you have a bunch of birds, you know, you can see that like V shape that sometimes they do. So these are called emergent properties, and like they exist, right? One person cannot have like, you know, social dynamics, but a bunch of persons can. So once again, like if you want to like understand how to heal people, you don't go and study physics because, oh, we're all made of atoms, so I should study physics. You need to see each thing in its own level. And I feel like a lot of the times we as humans tend to forget that. We try to use a theory that works pretty well for like small thing, and then try to like apply it to like the broader spectrum of things. So for example, bringing it back to like a more, I guess, concrete example, sometimes people like to blame social issues into like, oh yeah, we should just be like more harsh with criminals. And it's like, okay, sure, like if you see like one individual and you're like, okay, we need to give like a punishment for whatever the crime was. However, if you start seeing like a trend in your society that there like crimes rising up, probably the answer is not going to be to actually just like increase punishment. And you can see that in so many countries. When you do have harsher laws and punishments, crime, okay, it goes down a little bit, but it doesn't solve the root issue. And yeah, or like, I don't know, like the same thing, you can also do it like on the other way. Going back to race theory, there's this really to me is actually nonsense, but a lot of people think that, oh, all white people are racist. And it's like, okay, sure, there might be some like dynamics where one race, or group of people like take advantage, or more than take advantage, I would say, like the situation shows you that there's some kind of like difference when it comes to like opportunities or things like that. And that might be something that you want to solve. And okay, like, I'm not like fully on board with that idea, but it's like a sounding idea in my opinion. But then to extrapolate and say that, oh, like actually every one person from that group is like racist, or it's perpetuating like this whole like systemic issue, that's like just flawed logic. And once again, like I feel like why this is important and why reality and truth are like my first point. I feel like a lot of times many problems could be solved by people just wanting to like actually search for the truth and not just confirmation bias. Of course, it feels great to, confirm your own ideas, but you should also challenge them, because you and your identity are not like your ideas. Ideas are just like these, once again, like train of thoughts that go through your head and that help you to make sense of the world. So what you actually want to have is the correct ideas, the ones that actually tell you how things work. You don't want to believe that there's like a god of fire or spirit of fire, and he like comes into what you call it, like campfire, like it's not like a representation of a god or anything, because for example, pre-Hispanic cultures here in America, and by the way, I'm referring America as the two continents. Here in Chile, we think about America as like the whole continent. Um, they might have thought like all they wanted about this god of fire, but when the Spaniards come and they have like actual cannons and in future, and then we have like flamethrowers, it doesn't matter. That's your like check and balance with reality. And once again, like for social things, and the more complex systems that you're trying to look, it's harder. That's actually the beauty of like the scientific method, is that you isolate everything and you see like exactly, okay, if I take away all the other variables, how important like this one is. You can't do that like all the time. Especially you can't do that with like the counterfactual or counterfactual. I'm not sure how to translate that, which is like, oh, what would have happened if I had gone the other way? What if the other faction of the Russians won the civil war and the Russian Revolution? What if the king stayed and like they were never like dethroned in the French Revolution and all of that? You cannot like, it would be great, but we just can't do it. So again, I don't know, I don't want to like keep repeating myself, but I feel like it's really important to like know that truth, it's tricky to get, and we shouldn't be acting like when we have like we shouldn't be acting as if we knew truth, because truth is a hard one to grasp. That's what I'm trying to say. And we should be more humble. I feel like a lot of people speak, and like a lot of people speak with such like authority, like if they know actually what they're talking about, and they have like 100% certainty. And that's it's interesting because, the more you know, I consider myself someone that's like very knowledgeable in a lot of like stuff, not an expert in anything except for like maybe front end software, which is the thing that I'm do. But like the more that I know, it's like, whoa, there's so many more things that I don't know, and there's so many variables that you could like think about them. And I'm sure that if anyone ends up like listening to this, that happens to you as well. The more you know about something, the more you realize that there are like a bunch of other things that you don't know. So yeah, I don't know, I think that every human should like strive for truth and reality. And I just want to say, like, that's not really an easy thing to do, because sometimes some people want to be lied to, which is baffling to me. I don't know. Once an acquaintance of mine gave me a really good example. He is maybe a firefighter. And when you are on a fire, there's two ways to die. One is asphyxiated because of the smoke, and that one's like the best one, because you just like lose your consciousness. You don't experience like any pain except for like probably like choking on the smoke. Like oxygen just doesn't reach your brain, and you end up dying. And burned one is the really bad one. That's like all pain. You suffer up until your last moment. So he was telling me about this time that there was a fire, and like someone died. And the thing is that firefighters, I'm not sure how, but I think that they can tell how people died, like if it's either asphyxiated or burned. So this guy, random guy, died burned, and his mother asked like my acquaintance, like, did he die in pain? She wanted to know if he died asphyxiated or burned. And that's a hard one, because like telling her the truth is not going to give her any kind of relief. If anything, it's like bad news. So I ask you, what would you do? Like, you know that he died a horrible death, and you can lie to the mother and tell her, no, 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 he died like kind of peacefully. Or you can tell her the truth and tell her that he died in a lot of pain. That's an interesting like scenario and question. I do think that I would tell her, the truth, like how he actually died, because if she asks, she wants to know that. If she wanted to be lied to, then why would you ask? And like, once again, this is a really like interesting situation, because a lot of people that I ask, some people have said that, oh no, I would rather someone lied to me. I asked to my own mother, and she was like, I would rather someone lied to me in that situation. Which, once again, it's like, well, I don't know, man. And that's a hard pill to swallow, that some people actually want to like be lied to, that they don't want to know the truth about the situation as important as children's death. Yeah, I don't know. And I think that we as humans should strive to like always tell the truth, or, well, not always. It's not like a golden rule that's never to be broken. I think, once again, like a situation, if you are, let's say, in like Nazi Germany, and you're hiding some Jews, and then the Nazi officer comes to your house and asks you like, are you hiding some Jews? Like, of course you lie, because there's some things that are more important, like saving a life. Once again, I'm not like a purist, I do have like room for leniency, but I think that room should be like pretty small, in your day-to-day life, in this day and age, where like, at least in the Occidental world, like, we don't face those hard decisions. We shouldn't lie, if you, for example, let's say, oversleep when you're going to work, and they ask you like, hey, why did you arrive late? You should say like, hey man, like, I just overslept, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. And same thing, like if you don't want to go up to a place, don't make up like an excuse. Just tell the person like, hey, I'm like really not feeling it. It's not easy. Um, but I think it's better. And I don't really have a reason why I think it's better. To me, it's kind of like intuitive. But yeah, same thing if someone asks you like, hey, does this make me look fat? Well, I mean, they are asking you, give them your honest opinion. I do think that the whole world would be better if everyone like was more prone to tell the truth all the time. Yeah. So anyway, I think that truth and reality should be like one thing that we all should like really think about and strive for. What's real. Don't spread misinformation. Check your facts. All of that. Well, anyway, on to the next point. The mind and the body. Oof, man. I think that they are really important. um, which is duh, of course they are important. But what I'm saying about the mind and the body is that those are like the two things that you use to like exist, pretty much, right? Your body is your hardware, is what uh, gives you a physical reality, and your mind is what moves that thing. And I do think that they are one in the same. I personally don't believe in like the soul. But I do believe in like consciousness, and that seems to only exist within this like physical thing that we call the body. So I think that everyone should like really take care of their body. We should all exercise, and we should all be healthy or strive to be as healthy as we can. And once again, these are not like golden rules. I'm not making any like strong statements. It's like, oh, this is a must 100% all the time, maximize for this. No, I'm just saying like these are general guidelines that I've come to realize and kind of can put into words on the why and how in my, once again, 10,000 days of life. I think that people in general, they don't pay attention to either their mind, neither their mind nor their body. They are both super important. So just to start, let's start with the body. I think that a lot of people, they get injured or they have like pains and they don't do anything about it. It's like, oh yeah, sorry, I can't do this because like my wrist hurts. And then like usually my first question is like, oh, are you injured or something? It's like, no, but I have this. And then it's like, wait, but why don't you like get that checked out? Like, oh, I injured it like a long time ago and it has never been the same. It's like, well, how can you allow that? Like your body is the only thing that's actually your own, like no questions asked. Like it's even more yours than your house, and you're not taking care of it. That's just like, I don't know, man, that seems like a recipe for disaster. So yeah, like, and I'm not saying just like on aesthetically sense. Of course you shouldn't be obese, like the fuck, man. It's not healthy. You also shouldn't be anorexic. But let's say that you look okay, because there's a lot of people, there's like a certain genetics that make you look pretty like fine, almost like in shape. But then they are not. They like gas out when they run a little bit, or they can't like move something that's like a little bit heavy. I think that that's not right. Even if you look like great, even if you look like a fitness influencer, supermodel, if you are not capable of doing stuff, then what's the point? I think that images are overvalued in our society. And what I mean by images is how things look more than how things are. The reason why we want to look like young and we want to look fit, it's because of the things that these images tell you about that person, right? For example, if someone's muscular, it's like, oh, that person must be like strong and he can like, move stuff and like stop stuff and like protect me from stuff. If you bring back to like a more animalistic way, you can see, for example, I have a dog. And whenever he sees like a bigger, buffer dog, he's like, "Ew, I shouldn't get into a fight with them." And it's also the same the other way around. When smaller dogs see my dog, they're like, "Oh, I shouldn't get into a fight with him." They might bark, but they don't actually try to get into fights because they know, like the body, it's once again that hardware that moves you through existence, through reality. So, if you're especially like under 30 and you are realizing like, oh, I'm, starting to like breathe heavily when I'm like walking and talking or like going upstairs, or you injure your arm because you were like, I don't know, moving something in like a bad position. Like, man, we really should all, well, not all, probably like fitness people and like gym rats, they do it enough. But like, again, talking for the majority of the population, they should put more attention to their body, you know? And clearly it's a hard thing to do in this day and age because our bodies are not as relevant to survival as they used to be. Now, most jobs, okay, don't want to say most, but like a good bunch of jobs, they are like just office jobs. You don't have to do much. You can just like sit in a chair, sometimes typing. I'm a software engineer, so I know. And you just use your mind, and your body can be like, doing almost nothing. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily like a bad thing in itself. It must be really exhausting to work like a blue collar job. Can you imagine like moving heavy stuff like every day for 8 hours a day? Oof, that's rough. But when we were in the past, you need to be kind of fit to be, for example, like a hunter, or to even like this thing where you like plow, I think, the earth, for like farmers. And we've lost that. And once again, it's not that that is a bad thing, but we shouldn't think that the body is not something that we should take care of. I think it's really important, like really important, more than people know. And that's because, once again, body and mind are one in the same. Like the body does affect the mind and the mind does affect the body. So if your body is like in a pretty shitty condition, then your mind is going to be not necessarily in a shitty condition, but it's going to be lowered by your body. And now changing into the mind is also, the thing that moves you. Mind is the thing that gives the body the movement. And the mind is the one thing that's always with you. Like, well, I guess except when you're like sleeping, and I'm talking about the unconscious mind and all of that. And when the mind staggers, the body also does. That's pretty noticeable in like older people. When they retire, they can be like perfectly fine up until like 60 or 65, whatever the age is. And once they stop doing work, once they stop using the mind and they just like stagger and like, just watch TV all day, drinking margaritas and not doing much, that's when you start seeing in health like the rapid decline of a lot of people. That happened to my grandfather. He's still alive. He's pretty old. He has Parkinson's. And you could really see like him aging rapidly when he stopped working. Now, I'm not saying that he should be working, he's an old man, he deserves some rest. But the thing is that, especially for older people, from like older generations, they think that, okay, once I retire, I can just like chill and do like nothing much, do the bare minimum. Like maybe, meet with a friend, drink some beers and like watch TV all the time. Those are really like passive, at least watching TV or like reading newspaper, I don't know, like passive activities that they don't make much in the way of like moving your mind. I think we should all always be learning. And I'm not saying learning as in like an academic sense. That's definitely an option, but like just learning new stuff. hey, why don't you learn how to cook? Or why don't you learn about, I don't know, Second World War, like history? Or why don't you learn about poetry? And why don't you learn about art, music? Or it can be like, hey, why don't I like organize some kind of like event in my community? It can be any of these things, you know. Honestly, I don't think that there's one better than the other. I'm not going to say like, oh, we should all be like scholars. No, not at all. But we all should, yeah, I don't know, keep the mind moving, you know, keep using the mind. And you would see that the people that actually use the mind the most, like all the time, are the people that come with a great health when they are old. For example, university professors, you know, there can be some really old university professors, but because they are like always teaching and they are always in contact with young people, which of course have like a lot of energy and always bring new ideas and they always have questions, you see that, and I don't have any statistics for this, you know, it's just based on my observations, but you would see that these old people, they seem to keep a really good health, really deep into their age. So yeah, the mind, yeah, we really need to take care of that. And you know, I know that I've been talking about like old age, but okay, what about like, you know, let's say now that I'm like close to being 30 years old, how important is the mind? Well, it's hugely important. Like that's the thing, you know, it's so important all the time in your life, because the way that you shape your mind is also the way that you see the world. Like if you know about, for example, physics, you know, I remember my teacher from fluid dynamics, he said it's crazy that he was talking about him and the other professor, that are like hydraulic engineers, so they know a lot about like fluids. Sometimes they like enter buildings and they see like windows and stuff, and they kind of like can like visualize the current, the air movements through the building, or how would, you know, like if a flood came, how would that affect the thing. And that skill, that ability, it's something that's great, because two people can see the same building and one is like, yeah, it's whatever, pretty boring building, you know, all concrete and not much. And this other person seeing exactly the same thing can like think about all of these like variables and possible scenarios, you know, and like grasp like all the physics around it. You know, my uncle also does that. He's a structural engineer, and whenever he enters a building, first thing that he sees is like, oh, so this is like, you know, the main beam that's supporting the whole structure, and oh, like this is like a weak point, or like, oh, this is pretty well built, you know. um and you know, for example, in my personal case with music, you know, I play the bass, I play the guitar, I know a little bit of music theory, not much actually. I'm not really good, but over these many years that I play the bass and the guitar, you learn to like really listen. And it's crazy how listening to the same song with a friend of yours, you can tell him like, oh, like listen to this. Here, the drums do something that's like really cool, like some really cool feel, you know, in between. I don't know, like verse and chorus, or you can see how the same feel like changes every chorus, and that's something that, you know, usually goes over people's head, you know. And I know that if there's any musician listening to this, you would know, like musicians really listen to the very last detail of music, and that makes you realize how there's so much more depth to the same things that other people are looking at. So yeah, I mean, and I can go on forever, you know. Same thing with art, you know. I'm not really like, I do appreciate art, but I'm not really knowledgeable in art. And I'm sure that if an artist sees something, it's like, whoa, look at this, the way that this shade is used is like pretty great, you know. And that's when it comes, you know, in YouTube, it's full of like people that do deep analysis of stuff. Same with video games, and same with dancing, same with so many other things. With fighting, you can do that. So yeah, I think cultivating the mind, it's hugely important. And I'm not the first one to say this, you know, the mind and the body. I'm not the first one to say this, of course. Even the Greek philosophers knew that this was like very important. There's like some quotes of like Aristotle or Socrates or Plato. But yeah, I think that, you know, and also basically if you add up the mind and the body, that's you. Like that's all that you are, you know. All the other things that you own, they can like go to shit, you know. Well, I guess your body can also go to shit, but like what you truly are, you know, if they transport you to a new world, it's basically your body and your mind, you know. If you go into like an isekai, right, these animes where like you die and you reappear in like a new world, unless they give you like a new body, that's you, you know. It's your body and your mind. That's what you are. So take care of it, because taking care of those two things is taking care of you. So yeah. Anyway, next point: consciousness and the present. And oh boy, this is an interesting one. For the longest time, I was a guy that was like really skeptical to like anything that was like beyond the physical world. You know, like it pretty much doesn't exist. Like an atheist. You know, I was raised Catholic, and I think that, you know, I was like the usual like bounce to the other extreme and be like, no, none of this shit matters, and so and so. But over time, I realized that consciousness is different than the mind. And how do you realize this? So, what is consciousness if it's not the mind? I think consciousness is the observer that's looking at the mind. It's crazy, you know. It's really hard to like explain, especially if you don't have any like experience with this kind of stuff. But like the whole Buddhism like train of thought and meditation and mindfulness and all of these, they kind of like look at that, you know. The mind is this like radio that's like constantly throwing thoughts at you know, and not only thoughts, also feelings. However, you can choose, and that's one thing that, you know, I think a lot of people disagree with, but you can choose not what you feel, but what you do about your feelings. So for example, if someone like, I don't know, like comes and like, I don't know, says something mean to you, you're going to feel disrespected, maybe angry, or maybe you're going to feel threatened. However, it is your choice to decide to act upon that feeling. Or the same thing, if you have an intrusive thought, you know, okay, we all have intrusive thoughts, and you can still decide to like just not act upon them. So that tells you that the mind in itself is not everything. Or you can call it like a, you know, if you're really skeptical about all of this that I'm saying, you can call it like maybe like a background process in the mind, you know, like it's something that's much more, not necessarily primitive, but it's, I don't know, man, how to explain it. Once again, it's like the thing that observes your mind. That's what consciousness is, or that's the best analogy that I can come with. If you meditate, you would realize this, you know, how if you try to just like close your eyes, focus on your breathe, sorry. English is clearly not my first language. You would see how a lot of random thoughts pop in your mind, and you can say like, oh, I can't do this, you know, because all these thoughts come to me. I cannot like shut up the mind. And that's the thing, you don't have to. Meditating is not about shutting up the mind, but it's about not paying attention to it. And I invite you, like, go ahead, like just sit, you know, somewhere comfortable, close your eyes, focus on your breathing, and you would see how all of these random things pop up in your mind, and you can choose to engage with them, or you can choose not to. And on the same way, you know, like once you start like knowing or getting more familiar with that process, you realize that you can apply that to the whole life, you know. You can do such a thing as micro meditation, where you quite literally stop for some time and just like observe the world around you. And of course, this is easier in like a calm space, but you can also do it like in the middle of the city, you know? You can also do it in social events. That's something that I've done a lot lately. And I think it has bring a lot of like happiness to my life. Happiness and peace, you know? It can be your day-to-day life, but you know, for once, like just stop and like observe it. How great this is, you know, that we have such a thing as like a bed, you know, how great it is that, for example, you know, your friend is like laughing in front of you, or your lover, your partner. How many things we are losing in our life, how many experiences, how many things we're not noticing because we are so focused on our minds and the things that we have to do, or that we are doing, instead of like really appreciating the moments. And it's not something that you can do, of course, like all the time, or at least, you know, maybe like some Buddhist monks can, but you know, for us normal people, um, we can't do that all the time, because we do need to, like, you know, sometimes, like, you know, get actually into the mind, because we do have things like work, and oh my god, I need to go and like do this paperwork that I'm like missing, and I have to like pick up my children from school, and I have to walk my dog, and you have to like, oh, get to the gym, and you have to like, you know, so and so. It's not the thing about doing it all the time, but if you take your time to like stop and for one moment stop thinking about the past and stop thinking about the future and just appreciate the present moment, you come to realize that there's so much more, you know. It's almost like the world gets shinier, you know. You start like perceiving so much more. And you know, the city makes it hard. I'm not gonna lie, because there's so many stimulus in the city. So sometimes you don't want to do that, you know. All that you want to do is like, you know, put on your headphones and just, you know, like ignore everything else and focus on the thing that you're doing. And yeah, I personally have found that it's so much easier to do that when you're like in nature. I think it also comes like natural to people. But yeah, I think it's really important. I think I think that a lot of people would really benefit in their own lives by doing this exercise a little bit more. If you're like rushing through, let's say, traffic, you know, in a traffic jam, and you can like still, I don't know, be in the middle of a traffic jam, hating the world because, oh my god, why everyone moves so slow, why there are so many cars, and like take a time to think like, whoa, like I'm actually going home. Isn't that great? I could be in a war. I could be far away from home. Or like going to work. Isn't it great that you have a job? Isn't it great that your fellow humans were like so rich that we all can have like cars, to the point where it's a problem that we all have so many cars? You know, and the car itself is made by such a complex machinery. You know, I know a lot about physics, and I'm like, once again, I'm an engineer, you know. Might not be a mechanical engineer, but I could never like make a motor on my own. Isn't it great that we all can have that? I think it is, you know. Now, on a more personal note, one of the things that has brought immense happiness to me is to try to appreciate the beauty in the world. And honestly, there's beauty like everywhere. Especially, once again, in my case, see the light through the leaves of the tree is something that almost looks like paradise. I invite you, viewer, just, you know, go one day on a walk, or like, you know, if you find a tree, wherever you find something, and just try to like see that effect, when the light comes through the leaves of a tree. It looks gorgeous. It looks so beautiful. I wish I had more time to appreciate more that kind of stuff. And sure, it might be like better in a forest, but that's something that you can also do in a city. Just like for some moment, take a couple minutes, sit and watch and appreciate. And I think that you will find that there's a lot of beauty in it. And it's something so simple, there's not much that you have to do for that. Just find a tree and be on the day. But then at the same time, you can do the same thing in the night. Or you can like not do it in a tree. You can do it in the middle of concrete. Isn't there like a little leaf of grass growing in the middle of concrete? Isn't that beautiful? Isn't it great how small plant can grow in such a harsh environment as concrete? And sometimes it looks so beautiful if you look at like a small place in the world. And once you take the time to actually appreciate something so small as a crack in the road that's growing a little leaf of some plant, or see the sun through the leaves of the tree, or even see the lights of the city, it doesn't have to be all natural. You can also appreciate the artificial stuff. You start to realize it's like, whoa, yeah, it is really beautiful, this small thing that I'm seeing right now, that you wouldn't pay too much attention to normally, that you have to like be conscious about it to like appreciate. And that's when you realize, wait, the whole world is full of this. In this dance that we call reality and existence, there's so many more of these like small little things that I just never pay attention to, once again, for practical reasons. But they are all around you. And just that thought makes the world a better place, Yeah. And it makes you happier. Or at least it has made me happier. So, talking about, the important stuff, next point, family, friends, and love. Oh boy, what can I say? I personally, for the longest time, thought that I didn't really need much of people, I was pretty, not antisocial, but not so social, I'd rather just be on my own. And I do believe that there might be some people that actually don't need socialization as much as others, For example, the hermits, in the mountain. We've all heard like tales of that. To think that they are not happy. Sorry, I'm looking for my water. Oh well. Guess it's somewhere else. I think we've all heard those tales, and I do think that, those people can be happy. However, for the 99.999999% of people, we need to realize that we are social animals, like in our, and I'm talking about nature, when we're monkeys and all of that. We are social animals. We get comfort from the community. We get a lot of happiness and comfort from seeing another human's face and interacting, and mixing that socialization with the physical world. I know that now everything's like kind of digital, and that's also great, but it's also lacking a little bit of that like nice socialization, like in person. Because we humans can detect such subtleties into each other's faces and expressions. It's crazy, It's because we are made for this, It's so important for us to recognize how other people are feeling. Like, it's, once again, it's in our nature, Despite all the intellectual stuff that we can like do and say, and we can choose to like not follow the natural way, I think that socialization, it's such ingrained in us that we all should recognize it. you know, unless you're one of these like freaks that can actually like be pretty happy without like human contact. But once again, I know that a lot of us have thought about that we are like that one person. Um, but I invite you to like challenge that belief, because sure, there are people, sure, you could be that person, but the probability is really small. It's like really small, you know? And for the longest time, I, used to like hate, you know, well, not hate, that's such a strong word, but for a long time, I used to like really not like my life here, you know? I wanted to emigrate for a long time, ever since I went to Europe, but that's a story for another time. But now I think at a pretty good point in my life where I have a lot of friends, you know, and like from different groups, and I see them often, and I share memes, you know, and I laugh with them, and we go on drinks and we go on activities. And if I want to do something, I have like one person that I can like, tell him or her like, hey, let's go and do this. And I have another person, and I have another group, and honestly, it feels great. I think that I've never been happier with my social life as of now. You know, I think I'm peaking in that sense. And for one time, I went to the US for work, and it was great, you know, because, for the American viewers, if there are any, you guys sell a propaganda about your country that's so strong, you know? Like, we all think, oh, the States, the land of opportunity, the land of the free, and so. And sure, it was great when I was there. You know, I was walking through Denver, Colorado, in a really nice part in Washington Park, or that area. And the houses, they were so beautiful. The park was so beautiful. Everything was like pretty great, you know? I was really like grateful for that. But that whole thing lasted for like, I don't know, 2 weeks maybe. And then I was starting to feeling really sad because I had no one there, you know? I was like sleeping alone in the company house at the moment. So I started looking for friends. And I made friends like pretty quickly. You know, there was like a volleyball group that was playing in Wash Park, a really cool group. I met some really cool people there. I actually met my ex-girlfriend there. And the moment that you have friends, everything turns better, you know? And of course, I'm not saying that friends is the only way. Family is also another hugely important thing. There's a reason why family is so important in some cultures. In mine, for example, you know, I'm from Chile, like I've said, I'm a Latino, and I think that we Latinos really value family. And I'm not saying that other cultures don't, but we like put special emphasis on that. And family gives you such comfort. And yeah, I know there are some pretty shitty families. There are people that have like really bad experiences. But if you don't have that support of your family, you should build one, you know? Actually, building a family is the only thing that I want right now. I so wish that I was starting to building a family. However, I'm single right now. There's no one that I think would be like a good mother for my children that I know and that's available. um, yeah, sorry, I've been like just speaking all this time. I mean, that's what this video is about, anyways. I think the social part of life is something that's going to affect you deeply. Even if you think that it won't, I think that it's really important that all of us have like a strong social network. And I'm not saying so much for like, a lot of people say like, oh, it's important that you have like these social networks because then they will help you to like improve your career or like economic success. No, it's not a means to an end. Socialization and community, family, love, friends, all of that, it's an end in itself, you know? Like that's the objective. The happiest people. And if you see like interviews of like billionaires and people that have like everything else that you would want, like actors, They have the social validation, they have fans, you know, they can, I don't know, fuck whoever they want, billionaires can do whatever they want, you know, with the money. They all still say how family and close friends, it's so important. And once again, it only makes sense. We are, as humans, what differentiates us from another animals is that we are highly social and on a level of organization that's like beyond anything else. So it is important, you know? It is. And I so wish that my past self could see this video, because I used to think that it wasn't so much. That you could just go to a place and, like, once again, you can survive on your own, that's true, but you can thrive just on your own. Yeah, I like that. Next point. Oh, values, meaning, and spirit. This is oof, another interesting one. I think that we, as a society, we have become more and more agnostic, right? So like non-religious, that's what I'm trying to say. And religion gives you spirituality, you know, like that's a fact, you know. That's when people say spirituality, that's what they think, you know, like religion, some like higher being or some higher order or higher power or something, you know, of those sorts. And we as a society have become more and more non-religious, and therefore I feel like we have become more and more non-spiritual. And the values that we used to have because of Christianity, once again talking here in the Occidental world, um, they have been like weakened. And I'm not saying, I'm not, if I haven't said that already, I'm not religious. You know, I'm agnostic. I don't believe in any God or higher power or anything like that. But if you see, usually religious communities, they seem happier than your average citizen, you know, your average person. And I think it's because they get meaning from religion, and they get meaning and then get values from religion. And sure, they don't question like why that is, they just follow them, which can lead to like some pretty fucked up stuff. Like it has happened in the past, you know. I'm not saying religion is like has been like always good, especially if you go to medieval times, like they did some pretty horrible things. But if you think about it, we, on the grand scheme of things, we are just animals, you know. We still need to eat, we have urges, you know. You shit, you eat, you fuck, we get lazy, we want to get drunk, we like things that make us feel good, you know. We're animals, you know. But we're animals with a conscience and with a mind, with a pretty developed mind. If you think about it, it's crazy how the average person nowadays knows so much. Like the ancient Greeks, they knew shit compared to us. We have phones, we have the internet, we know so much, we're connected so much. And I think that just like when you see, for example, you know, a dog in front of like a construction site, they get scared because it's so much. Like just the world, you know, just existence is so much. The fact that you have to like do taxes, know how to drive, pay attention to, I don't know, the crime, and we have social issues and we have politics, and at the same time we have like art and we have fashion, and you have to work, so you have to know some skill, you know. Now we're learning so much more about like the human mind and, you know, social struggles and all of that. Like it's so much information and stuff that we get overwhelmed, whether we like it or not. We get overwhelmed by how many things there are. I think that that's one of the reasons why sometimes we get like existential dread, because now we know so much about like the world that our animal small minds, relatively small, get overwhelmed with all this flow of information, and we find ourselves in a world that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. It's like, okay, but what's it all for, right? That's the big question. What's the meaning of life? And we don't know, and nobody knows, and anyone that tells you that they know, they're full of shit. Religions, they give you like a framework, and they choose to believe, and that's one thing that's important about religion. Like faith is a choice. What I think is that faith is like a jump into the darkness. You don't know if you're right, but you have faith. You just do it. And what's crazy is that if we think that just increasing rationality in humans, it's going to lead us to like better life and be happier, you see that in practice it's not that way. Usually people that are more like simple in their lives, that have, for example, like a religion, and they have values, and they're like, no, I'm going to like live this way because this is what my faith tells me. I feel like they tend to be happier, like in a more deeply way. Maybe not in the day-to-day life, but in a more deeply way. They feel like, as one of my colleagues said, Mormon colleagues actually said, like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy. I feel like I know what I'm doing here and why I'm doing it. And Mormons, they put a lot of like emphasis into family. If you think about it, a lot of religions, they put emphasis into things that I've already mentioned. So I think that in the past times, like the ancient people, they sort of had this like wisdom, this knowledge, and they of course didn't have the tools to like explain exactly why all these things are. I'm pretty sure that you can like try to rationalize everything that I've said into this video, and like, oh, from an evolutionary standpoint, like it makes sense that we value society and like social stuff because that's the way that we improve our chances of survival. But going back to the reality, I don't think that it's really like the correct lens. I think rationalizing things is not always the correct way to go. So religion and all these rules and all these traditions is the way that the humans from the past found to like pass this wisdom to like future generations. And now that we are, after the Enlightenment, and people have become less and less religious, with the pass of time, we are forgetting a lot of this wisdom. I think that we're rediscovering it through science. But it's crazy, it's like, oh, okay, so many thousands of years had to pass of like science development, well, hundreds actually, to just go full circle and back to like, oh, guess what, like you should like be good to your neighbor, you should like care for your family, and you shouldn't be bad, basically. So anyway, so how do you make all of this without religion? I think that you, and by you I mean, one as a person, should go through that thought process of like, okay, but what do I value in my life? And it doesn't necessarily has to be like, oh, I'm going to sit and I'm going to write like everything that I believe in, but more like getting like an intuition. What do you value? What things are right and what things are wrong. And about meaning, I'm a nihilist. I don't think that there's, going back to my reality thing, I haven't perceived, seen, or learned about any proof or fact that will lead me to believe that life in itself has a meaning. Therefore, I'm a nihilist, because it doesn't seem to be meaning anywhere in the universe, at least from what I know, which is, of course, not much, but at the same time, it's quite a lot. So, like, that intrinsic meaning of life, I don't think it's there. However, if there's no intrinsic meaning to life, then you can give it your own meaning, you know? And sure, I always keep in the back of my mind, like, hey, there is not like a something that I know for sure, like an intrinsic meaning of life. Yeah, okay, I will keep searching for it, you know, for the meaning, but I don't seem to be having a lot of like, success finding it. So you make your own, you know, you choose your own rules, you choose your own values. And what's crazy is that, you know, like I said, I was raised Catholic and then I turned atheist, then I turned agnostic, which is how I've been ever since. But I do realize that my values tend to like line up pretty well with the Christian values, you know, like, you know, take care of your family, help the others, don't like steal, don't kill, so and so. So it's interesting, you know, how, at least in my experience, I've come full circle to be like, oh, like this was imposed to me, I reject it, and then I do my own way, and I realize that my own way ends up being kind of the same values that I had in the beginning. But I think that just doing that exercise, you know, it's good, it's useful. I invite religious people to like do it, you know, and be like, despite religion, I would probably do the same. And that only reinforces that. And that's great. Because then you have better clarity, you know. You don't go around life like not knowing what to do or when to do it. It gives you clarity on how do you want to live your life and what's the impact that you want to have in the world. And even if you don't have an impact, what are the rules of your own game? This game that we call life. Yeah. And I think that even for non-religious people like me, that's the spiritual part, you know? It's something beyond the rationality of the mind and beyond like reasons for things. It's more about what do you feel you should do regarding your life and your existence. And I think that's a really important discussion that everyone should have, at least once in their life, you know? Question everything, and questioning from time to time. It's really important. One great thing is that once you do this exercise, you know, then you find that it's so much easier to act upon your values because they are no longer imposed onto you by either society or your parents or religion, but they are yours. So then you believe them more and you're willing to sacrifice more for them. And by sacrificing, I mean, you know, you can go through like a really uncomfortable situation where you get confrontational with someone over something that you don't accept, or something that goes against your values, a situation that you don't like. But at least you have the clarity. It's like, okay, but this is the way that I choose to live my life. I'm not going to be a part of this, or I'm not going to allow this, or I am going to like actually do something to advance this whatever situation, cause, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, last important point, happiness. And happiness, oh boy, happiness, I do believe that it's a thing that we all strive for. Like everyone wants to be happy, right? However, happiness, you have like different types of happiness. For example, the drug addict that's injecting heroin, you might say, oh, he's happy because he's like releasing all this dopamine and I don't know, whatever hormones there are like in the brain that make you feel good. But I think that most people would agree that that's like not it, right? When we talk about happiness. Sure, you might be like happy at the moment, it might be pleasurable, but it's not happiness, you know? And this is one of those concepts that it's really hard to like give a definition onto. Like, how do you define what happiness means? Does it mean that you are like happy all the time? Like when people say I want to be happy, we all know that we can't be happy all the time, but we all want to be happy. So like, what is it? I think that I think that happiness is like this more like abstract thing that is like if you see it as a whole, you know, like are you happy with your life? If you could like take the whole temporal temporarity that is your life and you condense it, will you say that that condensation leads to a happy feeling? And if you say yes, I think that that is kind of like happiness. And so how do we get that, you know? A lot of people think that money brings happiness. A lot of people think that fame or social validation. But, you know, and once again, this is not, I haven't said anything new in this whole video. If anything, I'm just reinforcing all ideas that have already been said by people that are like much more smart than me, or that have more wisdom, or maybe they just like lived before me, you know? But I think that if you live an existence, and the reason why I left this for the last is because I think that if you do everything that was like before, you know, in my list, so I'm saying like search for truth and know what's real, take care of your mind and your body, um, be present, be in the moment, be conscious about the things that you do and the decisions that you make. If you take care and pay attention of your family, your friends, and your loved ones in general, and you have values in your life, I think that you will find yourself living a happy existence. Now, once again, none of these are like golden rules. Maybe there's someone in the history of life that did all of these, but they lived through such horrendous conditions like wars, famine, disease, you know, and they would say that they're not happy. But once again, I'm not trying to find a rule for them all. I'm just trying to find the 99% rule, you know, the one that applies to most people, you know. And I do believe that most people that live in this day and age in a somewhat developed country fall into this category. Um, a happy existence comes not from one specific thing, but it comes from an integration of all the aspects of your life. There's this concept about the Renaissance man, which is a man that it's like wise in many like aspects of life. And they say the physical, the mind, the spiritual, and the social, which are kind of like the things that I've said, right? Um, and I do believe that if you take care of all of those, you know, and once again, for most people, there might be some people that don't fall into this, but for most people, if you take care of all those four aspects of your life, you will find that that's a really happy existence, or at least, at the very least, it's like a correct one, a right one. You know, it's going to feel right if you do it. This thing of like min-maxing some aspect of your life, like, oh, I'm just going to maximize making money, or I'm just going to maximize the relationship with my lover, or I'm just going to maximize my physicality, my physical body. That's not it. I don't think that people that like fully pursue one and just like disregard the other ones, I don't think that they're as happy as they could be, you know? And I invite you to like think in your own life. You might find people that are very successful in one facet of their lives, but they are not so great in the other ones. If you look at their lives, or if you look even at your own life, do you think that they or you could be happier by paying more attention to the other aspects of the life? Aristotle said this, you know, like the virtue is in the middle point or in balance. So if you do have a great relationship with your family, you know, and with your community, and you do take care of your body, but you are actually like, you know, not knowledgeable in like stuff, you know, in like general culture and history and politics, Maybe you will find that you're happier if you actually pay some attention to like, hey, let's learn more. Or the other way, if you're an academic and you are like, okay, I have an okay body and I have a pretty great mind, but you don't have that many friends, you don't have that many people that you can talk to, why don't you try to like put more efforts into that? I honestly believe, and that's the thing, I cannot stress this enough. In my 10,000 days of life experience, I strongly believe that for the vast majority of people, if you try to be more balanced in your life and like cover the holes that you have, that either be the body, the mind, the social, or the spiritual. And once again, this applies even for non-religious people like myself. You will find yourself being happier. Oh man, I really want to drink a little bit of water. I'll be right back. So, those are all the important stuff that I wanted to talk about. However, I also think that it's important to talk about the problems that I see in the world right now, the ones that I think that are most relevant. And some of them have been talked about like a lot, and some of them not so much. And once again, this video is about like the important stuff. So the problems that I'm going to say are the ones that I do think that are the most pressing for humans right now. And I know that there's a lot of other problems, For example, global warming, it doesn't make it in this list, but I do think that that problem would be solved if we pay attention to the problems that I'm going to mention right now. I think that these are the underlying causes for a lot of the evil and the wrong in the world. So the first one, nihilism, pessimism, and doomerism. I think that there's like an agreement in most people nowadays that the world is getting pessimistic. And I've seen this a lot in a lot of people. It's crazy, It's crazy how the, I guess, current narrative that most people say is like, yeah, the world's going to shit. We're never going to have like affordable houses. Global warming is going to kill us all. We're always more polarized, and there's going to be like war and hunger and social collapse. And I'm not saying that these are not like possibilities. They sure are, but I do think that in general people don't give like a real read on how things are. You know how, well, you have the optimist, the realist, and the pessimist, right? So the pessimist is someone that sees the forecast and puts himself into a worst case scenario, And what does that mean? That it's not the one that's most likely, but it's one that's going to like go down. It's like, okay, let's assume that things are going to just like keep being bad or keep being wrong, or like the problems are going to increase. Optimistic, of course, being the opposite, and realist, the one that sees the things as they are. I don't think that it's irrealist, or wait, that's a word in Spanish. I don't think that it's fantasy to think that we have a lot of problems if we don't do shit right now. I do think that we're into like a lot of trouble. However, unlike most of my peers, and this is even like my own friends, the people that I'm close with, I have faith in humanity. Well, if you see like, I always like to have more perspective, and like see things from like a more historical point. I feel like there's been humans in all the ages that have said like, oh, we're going to die, the end is near. This is a tale that's as old as, I don't know, like humans, how things are changing for the worst. And I I don't think that this was the case like 50 years ago. If you look at the 70s, you know, once again, at least in the States, because you guys have such strong propaganda that one tends to think that that's how the whole world was. But people were like eager for the future. They would think about like, oh, but one day we will be able to like do this and do that. And they were really looking forward to what the future departs. Whereas my generation, they don't. They just see like bad and like bad things happening, you know, like everyone's afraid from the future. And that's not without a cause. Once again, I'm not saying that there are not problems that we shouldn't like be thinking about them, but every generation has had to face problems. Every generation, even boomers. Yeah. So yeah, controversial statement. Even boomers had to face like some challenges. And the challenges now do seem like huge, you know, and a lot of people feel impotent to those challenges. And that combined with like the meaningless of the world makes a lot of people fall into like like a state of mind that is like, oh man, like, you know, they just get more and more worried about the world and they're just pessimistic. And that's an interesting one, you know. I'm not sure how to fix this one, honestly. Um, I'm not sure how to give people hope. That's the thing that I feel like people has lost. Hope. And once again, you can say like, yeah, well, it's because, you know, we see how the politics have like manage all of these, you know, the system doesn't work. It's like, okay, yeah, but there have been times where things have been, in my opinion, so much worse. I don't know, like world wars, for example. Or what about the death plague? What about when the Mongols were invading some like small rural towns? What about constant wars? And if you think that we are like powerless now, what do you think about like the farmer in medieval times or even like ancient times? What power did they have? Not much, honestly. Not much. And the thing is that even if we can't do too much about this on an individual level, then why do you worry? You know, it's like, okay, if you can't do much, then why do you worry so much about them? I don't know, it's weird. Like, I think that people are like taking the global problems that we have right now a lot into their personal lives. And they are choosing to see more the wrong than the good. I was talking with a friend of mine, you know, she's the girlfriend of one of my best friends, but she's also a friend of mine. And she was thinking like, yeah, you know, I think that, by the way, she's a lawyer, so she's a really knowledgeable person. But she was like, yeah, I think that, you know, democracy is like on the down, you know, it's really like, how to say, like, it's in danger, you know, because there's been a lot of like extremist leaders, especially here in Latin America. And I told her, okay, like I hear you, you know, I hear you that there's been a lot of like far right wing people that have like come up as presidents and democratically elected in the latter years. But if you see at the history, like, yeah, there was one guy like that in Brazil and then he was voted out. There was one guy like that in Peru and then he was voted out. There's currently some people like to say that Bukele is kind of like that, but his period is going to end and he's going to give the power to the next president. So I'm like, so where does this like danger come from? Because if you look at the history of things, and right now with Milei in Argentina, he's right wing, sure, and he's doing some like pretty drastic changes, sure, but what makes you think that there's going to be like a new dictator? Like, if you see at the whole spectrum of the whole data, it seems to me like you're not giving the correct read on things, you know? There have been people from both extremes all this time, and things have changed, and there has been a lot of controversy, but democracy at least has been like respected. And yeah, I know Venezuela is happening right now, but Venezuela is its own like country, you know. It's like that's a kind of worms. But for the majority of the other ones, like what makes you think that it's like such a doomer uh, overview? And she didn't have like a good answer. She was like, "Huh, you're right," but she still thought that things were going bad. And to me, that small interaction, it's so representative of like the state of mind of people nowadays. Like for example, for global warming, we are making progress. People are like, "Nah, yeah, this is going to shit. We are never going to fix this." And then you're like, "Hey, do you remember the ozone layer? Do you remember that it used to be like a huge deal?" And I don't know if you guys know, but like that problem is fixed because we were like releasing some like really bad chemicals, and when we realized that, like all the countries in the world like agrees like, okay, let's ban this one, and we fixed the problem and we fixed it. So that's the thing, it's like we have fixed so many problems before, and yet people still think that that we will be unable to fix all these problems in the future. I'm not really sure why. I mean, I have some theories, but I don't have any good ones. So yeah, I think nihilism and pessimism and doomerism is one of the problems that I see in the world right now, and I'm not sure how to fix it. So please, anyone that has any idea, leave it in the comments. I will read them for sure if anyone ends up like watching this video. Second problem that I see is money as a value. So what do I mean by that? I think that because of capitalism, people are starting to see like, oh, if you make money, you're like good, you're like making it. If you're rich, it's all good. Wasn't it like 50 cents that said, get rich or die trying? That mentality, it's so bad, you know? And I'm not saying bad as in evil, I'm saying bad like for the person. Because money is not all. And just making money doesn't make it like good. You can be like a scammer, you can be like a thief, and that, even if you make a lot of money and you don't get caught, that's not good. So not the fact that you make money makes it good enough. And I think that you can even like take that more into like people. For example, I was talking with my friend the other day, which I told him like, hey, this is a video that I'm making, I'm going to say it right now. Like that thing for a lot of women of thinking like, oh yeah, I just want like a sugar daddy. Like, I'm not saying that sexual liberation is wrong. I'm not saying that, sleeping with people is wrong, but like, is that really how you want to like make a living? Is that really how you want to make money? You know, by like sexually pleasing another person that you're not really interested in, that you just want the money from. And sure, you can say, well, hey, you don't harm anybody. Well, if anything, you probably make someone happy, right? The sugar daddy. Um, but I don't know, whatever happened to like, hey, the way that you make money is important, you know? Because just making money is not, I don't know, to me it's so obvious, or intuitive. If not, maybe not obvious, but like intuitive. If someone paid me like really well, let's say like thousands of dollars to do some work that is like useless and like meaningless, like let's say pushing a button that does absolutely nothing, but for whatever reason this like millionaire wants to give me money to do that, I wouldn't. And yeah, I mean, okay, let's put numbers into it. If someone gave me like millions of dollars, like $1 million per day to do this, yeah, I would do it for like many, many days, but I wouldn't do it forever. I would do it until I have enough money that I don't have to do that shit anymore. But yeah, I would much rather earn less money and do something that I like more than to earn more money and do something that I don't like as much. Which is actually, one of the reasons why I'm staying for the moment here in Chile, and not going to, the States. It happens a lot that these companies, like, they hire people from Chile because we're cheaper. They must pay us like half of what they would pay to a software engineer in the States. But then they don't bring you to the States, so they pay you over the market of Chile, but lower the market of the States, so it's a win for them. And people would say it's a win for you, but it's, I don't know, sometimes it feels like a soulless work. And once again, I'm saying this for me. I'm not extrapolating this example to like more people. I know a lot of my colleagues work that way. But if you could like, for example, oh, this is one, like, a lot of people want to be fitness influencer. I'm into fitness like a lot. Like, do you really want to like just make another clothing brand that's going to be exactly the same shit as all the other clothing brands, not adding anything of like real value to the world, and just like keep boosting consumerism into people? I know that a lot of people do, and like that's the thing, that's the thing that I see that's so wrong. Like, people, they don't believe anymore into like doing something valuable to make a living. They just think about making a living because just making money is good enough. A lot of people could argue, okay, but that's because of the system, the capitalist system that we live in. And okay, that might be true, like the system pushes us towards that. But even like that, like, I don't know, do people like really take their time to like think about their lives and see how meaningless that is, and how a meaningless way of living leads you to like not being so happy, but you ignore it just because you're making like money? And once again, I want to make like the make a caveat that of course I know that there's a lot of people that don't have the privilege to like choose what they want to work on because they just have to make money to survive. And I know that the people that are in that situation are like most people sometimes. um so I'm not going to make like a judgment on that. I'm not going to say like, oh, it's wrong, like even the people that are struggling heavily should do this. No, but I'm talking for the few of us that can like think more about like what we should do. Like, I don't know, once again, what happened to doing something of value to the world? And that's, one of the bad things about capitalism is that it doesn't really talk about the value of things, it talks about the price of things. Like, if you can make money of it. But it still baffles me how most of my fellow humans don't think about doing something that's actually valuable, you know? It baffles me how so many people just like resell things that they bring from China, not really doing anything like else for the world, you know? And yes, you can make the argument that it's like, oh, but they are actually providing the service that is bringing those things from the, yeah, but shut up. Like, we know that those are like, to say, like mental acrobatics to justify what you're doing. Because sure, you have a way of living, and sure, you're not hurting anyone, and that's good, but that's not like enough, at least for me. Like, sure, you're not hurting anyone, but hey, is it of value? Would you be the person that happily sits pushing a button that does nothing for hours and hours in a day if you were paid the same salary as a medic? I tend to think that a lot of people would do that for some time, but over time that would be like, I don't know, such an attack on the soul of the person. They will really realize that that's such an unhappy way of living. Yeah, I don't know. Once again, I don't have a solution for this problem more than like, hey guys, like think a little bit more about what you're doing with your life. But if you are someone that like struggles with money, even like that, think about it. There are some ways that you can choose to do one job over the other. If something really doesn't make sense to you, if you don't think that you're doing something good, and especially if you think that you're doing something bad, I invite you to like actually consider it straying away from that path. Because I think in the long run it's worse for your soul, for your mind. Third problem is lack of perspective. And oh boy, I think I'm going to tie this one with the fifth problem, which is polarization and over socialization. It's not like a surprise to anyone that we all feel like our world is getting more and more polarized. And it's crazy. I even see this in my close friends, you know? There's such a thing as like people saying, oh, the paradox of tolerance, which says that basically you have to be intolerant to intolerant views to improve tolerance, which sounds iffy to me. um, because like how, like, don't you realize that you're actually doing that thing that you're vouching against? You know, it's like, hey, I'm not going to tolerate intolerance, so you're being intolerant, right? And what I'm saying, you know, with polarization is, you know, I feel like before people could like have different views and disagree and still be like friends and don't think that the other person is a bad person. But for example, you know, with my ex-girlfriend, I used to talk with her about this, and she would say that, you know, someone that's conservative, it's probably not like a good person. I'm like, wow, that's like a big statement, you know? I understand that you disagree maybe with some of their values, some of the ideas, or some of the ways, but like to make the judgment that someone from the other political side is not a good person just because of what they think, like that's polarization, like one of, like by definition. And by the way, I'm not saying that it's only from like the left to the right. I also think that it's from the right to the left, you know? It's like, oh yeah, but this guy, you know, he's like a communist. You hear that a lot, you know, for like anyone that's from the left. And you really get this like animosity towards other people just because of what they think. And why did I tie this like polarization with like lack of perspective? Because I really think that people have like lost the ability, or maybe they never had it, you know, what do I know, I've only been living for 10,000 days, of like realizing that the other person has come from like different life experiences and a different uh, perspective of the world, you know. So maybe the things that they think make sense if you come from that background, you know. Maybe the farmer that's more conservative has a point because he sees like all this change that comes only from people that like come from the city, that does not apply a lot to his way of life. And the other way, you know, maybe, you know, people actually fight more for like social issues because they have lived that close, because they have, I don't know, like a homosexual brother, or they have like their best friend who was like bullied for something, or they have experienced racism, all of this stuff, you know. Once again, I don't want to make it like so much about like one, like let's say left is right over right, or right is right over left, because I think that it's something that happens in all of the political spectrum and all of like people, you know, in general. Like, how come that we don't understand that the other person can have a different point of view, and that doesn't necessarily mean something about the character of that person? Like, you feel me? For example, with this Mormon colleague that I had, his name was Dave. Great guy, like a really great guy. Like, I interacted with him a little bit, and you could tell that he was like a good person, you know. And the same way that I interacted with people that were like really liberals, and I could tell like, oh, they're good people. But then when you talk with them and then you ask them about like the views of the other side, they like instantly put them into like the bad people like basket. You know, it's like, oh no, because if you believe that, then you can't be good. It's like, man, like how egotistical you have to be to think that only your way is the right way. And how also, you know, how can you like not have perspective and understand that all those views, they're also not something that like one crazy person thinks, that there's like millions of people that think that way. Why do you think that is? Do you really can't like make the thought process of like, oh, there's like a good bunch of people that think this way and that push for these values? I wonder, like, let's change perspective and see from their point of view why they think this way. And people seem to like just can't do that. Or even if they do, because that's the thing, like I've had this conversation with people that are like pretty clever, and like they do it, but then they still disregard it completely. That's crazy, that's really is crazy. And I'm saying, like I have friends from like all the political spectrum, and what's crazy to me is that those friends wouldn't be friends between them, even though I know that we like kind of share values. Not so much ideas, but we share values. There's a reason why they are my friends. And yeah, it's a shame, I think. It's a shame. Anyway, and I didn't touch too much upon over socialization, but it's similar to what I've said. It's crazy to me that people, for example, neighbors, they fight over issues that are happening thousands of kilometers away, that they've never met people from that group that it's been affected. And I'm saying specifically for like political things, like wars or like policies. Like people here in Chile are getting into arguments and fights and disliking each other over issues that are happening in the US, which is how to say it? I'm not saying that it's bad to like know about those stuff, and I'm not saying that it's bad to talk about that stuff, but like, hey, let's do the reality check. In our day-to-day life, in what actually matters, in our reality, those things shouldn't have that much of a weight into our life. What if someone doesn't think that trans women are women? Or for example, doesn't think that trans women should compete in sports? And yet, you never met like a trans person, you've never met like a trans athlete, and yet you're still fighting with this person that, had they not mentioned that, you could be like, just enjoying a drink and having a laugh, but because they mentioned that, now you feel like they are like, ooh, they're like a bad person, someone that I don't want to be around. Like, isn't it crazy? Like, am I not, like, please someone tell me, like, am I not the only one that sees something wrong with that, How we are fighting over issues that don't affect us directly or indirectly, or that are like from thousands of like kilometers away, or that they are from like many years ago. It is crazy to me, and I call that over socialization, because it's like almost like, sure, if that's something that affected your brother or your family or close friend, I understand that more, it makes more sense. But if that's not something that like you're a part of, then why are you making your life less happy by fighting for a cause that's not yours with a person that's also not directly involved in that, Like, and political correctness has a lot to do here, Like when you say some words, people hate you, even if you don't do it in the correct way, because of, and that's where the mumble jumble comes in. It's like, man, I don't know. It's almost like common sense isn't common anymore. Like, to me, it's common sense to like, hey, let's not fight over things that are not like really important. If you think different in this hypothetical situation of what we should do about this topic, but if you're my neighbor and we take care of each other and we're still like have a beer over the weekend, why is that not good enough to like have a happy coexistence with someone? That's the thing that to me is pretty obvious. Like, I care I care so much more about what people do, like people's actions, than what people think. And that to me is a much more peaceful existence. Because when you start fighting with people's thoughts, I feel like you start getting more isolated. or you start going into echo chambers where you only surround yourself with people that think the same way as you, which is something that the internet has made possible, which can be good in some instances, but it's also bad if that isolates you from the people that actually are around you, you know? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, literally ban from your life everyone that disagrees with you on this topic and this topic and this topic and this topic and this topic? Most people are good people, or if not good, they're okay people. How come we don't realize that? It's a mystery to me. But anyway, the last problem, this is really the last part of the video, is disconnect from nature. It's crazy because I don't think that we as humans, we have like evolved technology in a way that it's almost like magic, honestly. This thing about like talking or like not needing a river because we have such a huge system, like pipe system, or like food, right, that appears into like the supermarkets but can be farmed from like kilometers away, and kilometers, miles away for my American friends. It's a wonder, it's wonderful, I'm not gonna lie. So I don't think that not being dependent on nature in itself is a bad thing, but being connected with nature makes you realize what's the natural way of things, the natural flow of things. And this is a concept that in Oriental philosophy they touch upon a lot, how important it is to like see nature, and like feel nature. Because nature is the way that things organically work, like by definition, right? This is the way that life found that keeps the balance, the natural movement of things. And like I said, we as humans, we are animals. Like in the big scope of things, we were animals like not so long ago. What, the first like big structure was built less than 20,000 years ago, which is almost no time into the like scale of like the earth and shit like that. So for us to live so disconnected from nature, I think it creates a very unnatural setting for which our biological hardware is not meant to be. We are seeing a rise in mental health problems, mental diseases, like a huge rise in that. And sure, like a lot of people say social media and so many other factors, but really, like, I think it's because we're living in a world like that's so unnatural to us that it's going to cause stress. It's like if you take, let's say, a dog, which it's already like a really socialized animal, but if you take a dog and you put him in a place where, I don't know, to drink water he has to like chew on something, and to eat food he has to like drink something, and to have, I don't know, like a place to rest he has to do like this task. And let's think about like a laboratory, in like a really unnatural way. You're not going to see the dog as happy as one that's like running through the fields and like has an owner and just like goes to the river when he's thirsty, because it's not natural. And I'm not saying that everything that's natural is good, that's of course a fallacy, but nature is the way that things were for the longest time. So we, as animals that we are, find comfort in the natural way of doing things. It's more comfortable to have a small community and knowing everyone around you, and that everyone around you, it's kind of similar to you in like culture, race, and all of that, than to live in a mega city where everyone speaks a different language and everyone's like different and has different backgrounds. And I'm not saying anything that like, oh, that means that racism is good or any like crazy thing like that. I'm just saying that that way humans are like meant, sorry, not meant, but they are more used to, from once again like historical uh, point of view. And same thing with nature, you know, we know that we shouldn't, for example, like, you know, burn all the forest because then we won't have forest. But that only works if you live in a forest. If you live in a city and people are like burning the forest or like cutting down the trees, and then you never see the forest, to you like nothing has changed. But the problem is that, you know, we are actually killing all the forest, and then we won't have forest. And I feel like naturally people would see, it's like, oh, we shouldn't do this because, like, you know, you live with it, and then you see that it's like, oh, this is the consequences of my actions. If I eat too many fish, we fish all the fish, and then we don't have fish. So then you don't, because you want to have fish for the future. But if you live in a city where all these processes are like outside of your experience as an individual, you don't really pay attention to it. And that causes a lot of things. For example, consumerism, right? Like someone wouldn't, like, once again, I don't know, build like a huge structure made out of wood because he knows that it's going to run out of wood, because he's going to cut all the forest. And same thing with animals, and same thing with like resources in general. You're not going to like mine the very, like all the mountains because you see how you destroy the mountain. But if you live in a city, you know, which is a controlled environment, you don't see any of that. And I think that that disconnect causes a lot of problems. A lot of reasons why people, they rush through life, why they consume so much. Consumerism is a huge problem. I should have put it here, but I'm saying it right now. I didn't used to believe in this when I was younger, you know, but through a course of like Oriental philosophy, they put a lot of emphasis into how important it is to observe nature and feel the way that nature behaves. And it makes you feel peaceful. Like that's not news to anyone, you know, like nature makes you feel peaceful. That's why people go on hikes. That's why people go to see waterfalls. That's why people go and have like go to natural reserves. Because that's an ecosystem. Nature is an ecosystem. Nature is balance. And the problem right now is that we live in environments, cities, you know. The city that I live in is especially large, like 8 million people. It's a huge city. We don't live in a balanced world. We don't live in a balanced environment because cities, they suck resources from other parts. So you never see the consequences of the way of living in a city. So we should fight against that, you know. We should try to like go out more into nature, and we should try to go on like a more natural way. And I'm not saying taking it to extreme, like, I don't know, then just don't use vaccines because they're not natural, not that shit. But I'm saying like we need to find some kind of balance, because this imbalance where people are like fully into like a society and like never leave a city and never leave civilization, it keeps you from realizing how the balance of nature is. And the balance of nature is the balance of reality. And well, if we don't do, the world's going to end. So anyway. So that was a pretty long rant. I'm pretty sure that there were a lot of like disconnected thoughts and unfinished ideas. And it might not be the best video on YouTube. But I don't know, I want it to be this way, you know, so some like more improvised, and just like speak my mind and what I think, and I'm really curious to know what people in the internet think about some of the points that I've said, many of the points that I've said. I really want to know if someone else also thinks the way that I think, or if someone has a really good counter argument to some of the things that I've said. Like, please let me know. I will be reading everything. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this anyway, like this kind of like videos where I speak my mind anymore. Um, Maybe. Who knows? This was a special occasion. This is because I turned 10,000 days of life today, and I wanted to do something special for it. Because I think it's an important step or like event in my life. So yeah, I wish you all a happy life.